Your phone lights up. A name you haven't seen in weeks, maybe months, suddenly appears on the screen. No explanation, no apology. Just a message, casual, almost as if no time has passed at all. And in that single moment, everything you've built during the silence gets tested at once. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this text arrived, when it did, what it actually means, and most importantly, what to do next so that moment doesn't undo the progress you've worked so hard to protect. If you've ever felt your stomach drop the second their name appeared on your screen after weeks of silence, comment, "I know that feeling, so I know you're not alone in this." Before we get into what to do, it's important to understand why this text arrived in the first place, because the timing is almost never random. Narcissists don't reach out after a long silence out of simple boredom or coincidence. There's usually a specific internal shift that precedes the message, and understanding that shift changes how you interpret everything that follows. Narcissists tend to reach back out at very specific moments, not when they miss you in the way most people experience missing someone, but when something in their life has disrupted their sense of control or importance. This might be a new relationship that isn't providing the same validation the old one did. It might be a moment of boredom where they suddenly remember how reliably you used to respond to them. It might even be triggered by something as small as seeing a mutual friend, a photo, or a memory resurfacing online. Whatever the trigger, the underlying motivation is rarely about you specifically. It's about what you represented, a source of attention, validation, or control that hasn't been fully replaced. This is why the message so often arrives at moments that feel almost suspiciously convenient for them. A slow weekend, a late night, a period where their usual sources of supply have temporarily dried up. Recognizing this pattern is the first step in understanding what's actually happening beneath the surface of that seemingly casual text. It also helps to recognize how often this timing correlates with visible changes in your own life. If you've recently posted something showing you're doing well, started a new relationship, achieved something meaningful, or simply appeared through mutual connections to be thriving, that visibility can act as a trigger in itself. Your growth becomes evidence that their absence hasn't damaged you the way they may have assumed it would, and for someone whose sense of importance depends on being missed, that evidence can be uncomfortable enough to prompt exactly the kind of reaching out you're now trying to make sense of. These messages rarely arrive with any acknowledgement of the silence itself. There's no, "I know it's been a while," or "I understand if you don't want to respond." Instead, they tend to open as though no time has passed, a casual comment, an inside joke, a question about something unrelated to what actually happened between you. This isn't accidental. Approaching the silence directly would require acknowledging responsibility for it, and acknowledging responsibility isn't something most narcissists are willing to do without significant pressure. Sometimes the message will reference something disarming, a memory, a compliment, or even a seemingly vulnerable admission meant to lower your guard immediately. Other times, it will be almost aggressively neutral, something as simple as a meme or a question about the weather, designed to feel low stakes enough that responding seems harmless. Both approaches serve the same underlying purpose, reopening a line of communication without requiring any real accountability for why it closed in the first place. There's also a common variation worth mentioning, the message that arrives disguised as practical necessity, a question about a shared belonging left behind, a logistical matter that technically requires a response. These messages can feel harder to ignore precisely because they seem to require engagement on the surface. It's worth recognizing that even genuinely practical matters can often be handled briefly and functionally without reopening the door to the broader emotional dynamic that existed before. It's important to name something honestly here. Seeing that message will probably not feel neutral, even if you've done significant healing since the silence began. You might feel a jolt of anxiety, a flicker of hope, a surge of anger, or some confusing combination of all three at once. This reaction doesn't mean you haven't healed. It means you're human, And the nervous system doesn't forget patterns overnight simply because time has passed. This initial wave of emotion is exactly why it's so important not to respond immediately. Whatever you're feeling in that first moment, whether it's longing, anger, or a strange mix of both, is not necessarily an accurate guide for what you actually want or need going forward. Narcissists often send messages during hours or moments specifically calculated to catch people off guard, when defenses are lower and impulsive reactions are more likely. The single most important thing you can do in this moment is give yourself space before responding, or before deciding whether to respond at all. This isn't about playing games or strategic timing in the way it might have felt during the relationship. It's about making sure whatever decision you make comes from a grounded place rather than a reactive one. Put the phone down. Step away from the screen entirely if you can. Give yourself at least a few hours, ideally a full day, before deciding what, if anything, you want to do next. This pause serves an important function, allowing the initial nervous system activation to settle enough that you can think clearly rather than reactively. Many people report that a message which felt urgent and significant in the first 10 minutes feels considerably less compelling after a day of distance. Before deciding how to respond, it's worth honestly asking yourself a simple but important question. What has actually changed since the relationship ended or the silence began? Not what they're implying has changed in their brief, casual message, but what verifiable, demonstrated change has actually taken place. Has there been any acknowledgement of specific harmful behavior? Has there been any sustained pattern of accountability? Not just words, but consistent action over time. Or is this message arriving exactly the same way every previous attempt at reconciliation arrived, charming, vague, and conveniently free of any real reflection? This question matters because narcissists are often skilled at implying change without actually demonstrating it. A message might feel different in tone, softer, more thoughtful, even vulnerable. But tone alone isn't evidence of genuine change. Real change tends to show up in specific, verifiable ways, not in a single well-crafted message sent after weeks of silence. It helps to remind yourself clearly and specifically what the silence itself has already done for you. Time away from a narcissistic dynamic typically allows several things to happen that are easy to forget once contact reopens. Your nervous system has likely had a chance to regulate outside the constant unpredictability of the relationship. Your sense of identity has had room to exist without being filtered through their approval or disapproval. Your daily life has continued functioning, perhaps even improving, without their involvement. All of this progress is real, even if it doesn't always feel obvious in the moment their name reappears on your screen. Recognizing what the silence has already accomplished can help put the incoming message into perspective. It's not simply neutral information arriving into an empty space. It's arriving into a life you've been actively rebuilding, and that context matters enormously when deciding how to respond. If, after reflection, you decide you do want to respond, whether out of curiosity, unresolved questions, or genuine reasons specific to your situation, it helps enormously to set clear terms early in the exchange rather than letting the conversation drift back into old patterns by default. This might mean being direct about what you're willing to discuss and what you're not. It might mean stating clearly that you're open to a conversation, but not to a resumption of the same dynamic that existed before. Narcissists often test these boundaries almost immediately, sometimes within the first few messages, to see whether the old patterns still apply. Holding firm here, calmly and without over-explaining, tends to be far more effective than lengthy justifications for why you're being cautious. You don't owe an extended explanation for wanting things to be different. A short, clear statement is usually more than enough, and it also serves as an early test of whether they're capable of respecting a boundary without immediately pushing against it. Whatever happens after this initial exchange, it's worth committing to watching actions rather than words, as the relationship if it continues at all, moves forward. Words are inexpensive for a narcissist. Promises are easy to make, especially in the early stages of reestablishing contact when they're most motivated to regain access. What matters is whether those words translate into consistent, demonstrated behavior over time, not just in a single conversation, but across weeks and months. This is often where people run into trouble. The first few interactions after a long silence can feel remarkably positive, sometimes even better than the relationship ever felt before. This isn't usually a coincidence. It often reflects a temporary period of heightened effort, motivated by the desire to regain what was lost, rather than a genuine, sustained shift in behavior. Watching closely over an extended period, rather than being swayed by an initially convincing return, tends to reveal much more accurate information about what's actually changed, if anything. At some point, whether the conversation continues or ends quickly, it helps to ask yourself honestly what you're actually willing to risk by re-engaging, even partially. This isn't about assuming the worst or refusing any possibility of reconnection. It's about being honest with yourself about what you stand to lose if the old patterns resume, your peace, your progress, your sense of stability, and weighing that honestly against whatever hope or curiosity is drawing you back toward the conversation. Some people find that even a small amount of re-engagement is worth it, either for closure, for practical reasons like co-parenting or shared responsibilities, or simply because they want to see for themselves whether anything has genuinely changed. Others find that any re-engagement at all risks undoing months of hard-won stability. There's no universally correct answer here. What matters is that the decision comes from clear-eyed evaluation rather than the pull of nostalgia or unresolved hope alone. If you do decide to respond or re-engage in any capacity, it's worth having a clear plan for stepping back again if the old patterns resurface. This might mean deciding in advance what specific behaviors would signal that nothing has actually changed. It might mean keeping trusted friends or a therapist informed of what's happening, so you have outside perspective if you find yourself getting pulled back into confusion or self-doubt. It might simply mean giving yourself permission in advance to stop responding again without needing to justify that decision to them or to yourself. Having this plan in place before you need it makes an enormous difference. Deciding how you'll protect your boundaries while you're calm and clear-headed is far more effective than trying to make that decision in the middle of an emotionally charged moment, especially one engineered, even if unconsciously, to make you doubt your own judgment. One final point worth making is that a single response or even a single conversation rarely tells you everything you need to know. Genuine change, if it exists at all, reveals itself over time and across repeated situations, not within a single well-managed exchange. It's tempting to treat this first interaction after the silence as a definitive test, something that will clearly reveal whether reconnecting is safe or worthwhile. In reality, most narcissists are capable of performing well for a limited window, especially when they're motivated to regain something they've lost. This means giving yourself permission to remain in an evaluative stance for longer than might feel comfortable, rather than rushing toward a conclusion after one positive or negative exchange. Consistency over time, not a single convincing conversation, remains the most reliable indicator of whether anything has genuinely shifted. Here's something worth sitting with, regardless of what you ultimately decide to do. The fact that you're asking these questions at all, weighing the message carefully instead of reacting immediately, considering what genuine change would actually look like instead of accepting vague implications of it, represents significant growth from wherever you were when the relationship first began. The version of you who might have responded within seconds, flooded with relief and hope, has been replaced, at least partially, by someone capable of pausing, reflecting, and making a deliberate choice. This growth matters far more than whatever happens with this specific message. Whether you respond or don't, whether the conversation goes well or reveals exactly what you suspected it would, the capacity to approach this moment with intention rather than pure reaction is itself evidence that the silence did exactly what it needed to do. It gave you room to become someone less easily pulled back into old patterns without genuine reason to trust that anything is different. A text breaking a long silence doesn't erase the reasons that silence existed in the first place. It doesn't automatically deserve your immediate attention, your forgiveness, or your trust. What it deserves is careful, unhurried consideration, guided by what you've actually observed rather than what you hope might be true. You get to decide what happens next, on your own timeline, according to your own standards, without pressure to respond simply because they finally decided to reach out. Whatever you choose, remember that the silence itself was never truly about punishing them. It was about protecting your own peace long enough to see clearly. That clarity doesn't disappear the moment their name reappears on your screen. It's still there, available to you, as long as you give yourself the space to access it before reacting. If this helped you think through a moment you're currently facing or one you've already lived through, let me know in the comments and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like